First item on the agenda is the consideration of 2020 utility rates. We'll hear from staff.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. First, one point on our technical dynamics tonight. Our city clerk and the city clerk's staff table is behind me because we're having some technical difficulties with the connection between the computer over there and the screens. So we're able to get power and an AV connection from the outlet here, and that's where our clerk staff is for the evening. So for our first item, looking at 2020 utility rates, this is our annual process of setting rates for the following year. I will mention up front that just for the council as a reminder, and also for the public, that the council heard a more elaborate presentation on the stormwater rate study that's been conducted over the last few months. Council had given some feedback and had requested some alternate rate options there, so we have those, but this presentation includes that information, but we won't be going into as much detail on the rate study unless council would like us to do that. So with that, I will turn it over to our Finance Director, Jackie Trout, who will give an overview of the recommended rates.
Thank you. Good evening. So in your staff report is the bulk of the information. We do have a couple slides as we talk about the storm drainage rates, but that's kind of towards the end, so we'll wait on those items and just talk about it as in the order that the staff report is written. I think there's a lot of information. We'll kind of go through each one of them individually, and feel free to stop me if you'd like to have more discussion on each of the individual rates. To start off, we do have our water rates broken down into their various categories. The first one being base rate. The current rate for single family homes for base rate in the city is $19.50, and out of city is $20.50. So we did analysis a few years ago to really look at whether our base rate was keeping up with our operations and maintenance expenses in the water fund, and realized at that point we needed to continue doing some nominal increases of about 3%, which is about 50 cents on each monthly base rate bill, just to continue to fund those operations and management costs. Water and Sewer Board had a couple of conversations over the last few meetings about that base rate and wanting to ensure that we're keeping up with that O&M expense, that 50 cent base rate increase was sufficient to do so. They did have some dialogue about increasing that more and where that kind of appropriate line fell to ensure that the water fund was building up the resources it needed for those maintenance projects that could be incurred. And they had also mentioned doing a dollar increase. So there was conversation on both sides at Water and Sewer Board about doing a 50 cent base rate increase as well as a dollar base rate increase. What's included in your staff report are kind of the methodologies for both of those factors. And I think tonight would be interested in some conversation and thoughts from council on that. But let's finish out water as a utility first and maybe open it up to some conversation. The consumption rate is next. We have talked about City of Greeley's rate increases as well and what that'll mean for Evans. We are anticipating an 8.5% rate increase for the treatment cost of our potable water. It is necessary for us to continue to pass that along to our residents at that same 8.5% rate. So what we have in the staff report is a table of what in the tier usage scheme that would mean to our residents. An average single family user, we like to say, uses about 9,200 gallons per month, and that would mean an increase of about $3.58 in their potable usage per month to that single family home. Do you want to stop there?
If I could just comment there too, also to point out in the staff report, we keep a running graph that you'll see regarding the annual increases, and just over the last 10 years or so, you might see that rate increases on a percentage basis have been low in some years, 1%, 3.5%, 1.5%, in that range. But then over the past few years, they've been much higher than that, in the 7%, even 11% two years ago, and 10%. That rate is different for all of Greeley's different wholesale customers, as they call them, based on factors in their model like peak use dates and peak use hours, and also just, well, yeah, those are the main drivers. And also just the overall system capital and operation and maintenance increases. This year, the 8.5% increase actually matches the rate that Greeley residents' rates will be going up. And I know that a couple of the other customers, Windsor and Milliken, who also have some of their water treated by Greeley, their rates are going up by higher percentages this year than Evans. That's been flip-flopped some years. But just for some background, that's kind of context for the 8.5. So it's the same that Greeley rates are going up.
Thank you for adding that. Also in the water are non-potable water rates. So we do look at what costs are increasing to that service as well. Less increase for non-potable. It looks like about 2.5% of supplies and operations costs that we're anticipating to be increased in 2020. So are recommending that we pass along that 2.5% cost increase to the residents. That would mean about a 37-cent increase in non-potable water usage bill for those months for those users.
That would be on the ditch.
And that's also on the
Ditch
ditch
rates.
as well, that 2.5%. There's a table in there of how that would reflect the ditch rates also. Does council want to have conversation on water rates, or we can continue and go through each of the individual rates
I say
first?
we continue.
Keep going.
Yeah, let's continue and come
Yeah,
back.
come back.
Perfect, thank you. Going on to the wastewater rates, as you recall, we did increase the last wastewater rate to fund the new wastewater treatment plant. And now that that is operational, it's time for us to look at what increased costs we'll have coming on to the wastewater treatment plant. We're still having supplies and services increases, chemicals, that sort of thing. Electricity is still costing more every year. So we are recommending that we also look at establishing an inflationary increase to the wastewater rates. So we have included in their tables a change of about $1.12, which is a 2.7 CPI inflationary index, as you recall, is what we used for our supplies and services budget as a city when we looked at what those costs coming to us would be increased in 2020. Also have included in the staff report the commercial water tap and usage rates. Therefore, commercial wastewater usage, all of those are showing that same 2.7% inflationary increase. Moving on to storm. Apparently I'm missing a page in my own report. You have in front of you a few slides, and I'll ask Karen to also put it on the screen. So coming back to storm drainage rates. From the conversation we had on the rate study, staff went back to Raftellus consultants to look at the structures that were presented in those residential and commercial, industrial, multifamily tiers to accommodate your comments from last time. So on this table is showing our current rates as they are today. That middle column is our previously reviewed alternative 2. And if you recall, our alternative 2 was the scenario that met the most of our grading criteria at that point. So the rates that we looked at then were anywhere from $8.12 for the residential and mobile home units up to $185.42 for that top tier 3 commercial and industrial properties. What we went to them and said, we went back and said, tier 3 looks high. It looks like maybe it's putting some of our industrial customers at a slight disadvantage. Maybe their storage yards relayed much of the conversation that was had here at work session, and asked them to re-look at that tier 3 and ensure that that was as equitable as it could be among all the payers. What that meant was kind of capping that tier 3 impact so that it was limited a little and they weren't paying that $185. It felt pretty high. And you'll see in that revised alternative 2 column there, each of the rates in the various other categories went up a little bit to accomplish shifting the bulk of that impact out of tier 3, or limiting what that top dollar range was, if you will. So what that means in the current rate structure review is a slight increase to residential and mobile home units. So $9.72. Tier 1 would go up to $19.43. Tier 2 would go up to $48.57. And tier 3 would go up to $121.42. And I'll just flip through and have updated how that fits into our various examples here. So for residential, that's 29 cents increase per unit per month. And I did mean to mention on the last slide, these are also inflated for 2020 rates. So the Raftellus rate study gave us rates based on the 2019 data that we had. The intention was for staff to apply the 2.7% inflationary increase to storm rates, similar with the other utility rates. So there is an increase here from the current going up to 2020, which is that inflationary increase. Mobile homes, you'll recall, they're currently being billed as at that commercial $14.55 per unit. So that will actually go down to $9.72. So they would see a decrease of $4.83 as they're restructured in our rate model. The tier 1 commercial and industrial, which are 0 to 14,000 square feet, so the smallest tier there, would go from $14.55 up to $19.43, so $4.88 increase for those users within this range. And again, examples of that size would be Ashcroft Self-Storage, Human Bean, and 7-Eleven are in those categories. The tier 2, 14,000 to 47,000 square feet, the example we had talked about before was Palominos. They would see an increase of $34 per month, as their rates would go to $48.57. And then tier 3, which is our largest category, so it's 47,000 square feet and larger. They would have a rate that would be set at $121.42, so an increase of $106 per month at this base rate. So again, this is not only our larger units that we're used to seeing. You know, we would expect to see Walgreens in there, or Sam's in there, I'm sorry, but it's also Walgreens. Innovative Foods, for instance, also falls into this size. And what we did is reached out to both Greeley and Windsor to look at maybe what a similar business in that 65,000 to 70,000 square foot lot size would mean. Both of those, Walgreens and Innovative Foods, are both in that 65 to 70,000 square foot range. And Greeley has their rate structure separated between industrial and commercial, or kind of on two different spectrums, if you will. So they would pay somewhere in the $103 to $135 per month. Windsor told us that their Walgreens pays $147 per month. So if you look at all our alternative 2 at $121, that fits very comparatively, I think, to what council was hoping to see from our conversations last time. So again, these are just a summary of the significant changes we talked about there, and in your staff report, as well as the summary of Raftellus's work and what these 2020 proposed rates would look like that we just discussed. And lastly, in here are refuse rates. Refuse are the one rate structure that Water and Sewer Board did not review information. That's a little outside of their focus areas. But we do have an increase in refuse rates. Waste Management has told us that we will be expecting to pay 3.6% more based on their detailed inflationary cost that they pass on to their users. So to incorporate that, our rate from 2019 to 2020 would go up 50 cents per user, and also anticipating a rate for recycling and then that extra trash cart as well if users are opting in for those rates.
So I'm going to stop you there because we're discussing the rates and the rate increases on this alternative 2, and there was some discussion at the last meeting that we were still going to look at the other alternatives. So I seem to have missed a meeting somewhere where we just decided that we're going to do alternative 2.
That was the direction that I heard, was that there was some consensus for alternative 2 based on those criteria that we
Based on
looked
more
at.
information being given to us.
Based on the goals that we had and the number of goals, I guess, that the various scenarios met. We talked, I recall about the impervious surface based approaches. You know, we can certainly go back to those. You know, we can, and we're going to move toward that. What I took from that conversation was that we're going to work toward a more specific impervious surface model, but that might take some time to get that data, which we don't have now. That seemed to be council's number one preference, was to get that impervious surface connection, but that this model, looking at parcel size for commercial, might give us a decent proxy on our way there for the next year or so. We can certainly revisit that and come back with more or alternative information.
Yeah, and I thought we were gonna get more information on that, and then Jackie just pointed out too that another city does rates industrial and retail differently too. So, I mean, I guess there was a lot of discussion the last meeting, and I came away with that that we hadn't absolutely decided on alternative two. But apparently that's my misunderstanding.
Not necessarily, I would look to the rest of council, and, we don't have to set the stormwater rate. It's most important to us that the council is very comfortable with the direction that we have. If you have more questions tonight, or you'd like to see additional modeling, we can go back to the consultant and keep working on it, which I think that I know that the impervious surface based rates will take significantly more time. Council could leave the rate where it is, or we could move to something in the middle. But to get the impervious surface data will take just more study time.
So actually, I do have a couple questions. Are you done, or are we?
Yes, no.
Okay, so I want to start back here with the Water and Sewer Board's rate increase of approximately $1. So I know in here it says that they want to prepare the water fund for future increase. That's fine, I understand that. But do they take into consideration any of the rates that were going to be paid for by, the growth and development? They're also going to be paying system development fees, which are going to go to those maintenance costs. Do they take that into consideration when they?
There was a lot of good discussion about what that dollar would mean, and if the water fund had sufficient revenues for major maintenance projects and what system development fees would be. I think there's also the difference between system expansion, which is what system development and tap fees are for, versus major maintenance, which is, redoing the lines when there's breaks and when there's problems as well. So the base rate is essentially designed to pay for system-wide maintenance, the entire water collection system.
I mean, I just would like to see more data of where they came up with that additional dollar, especially when it says, the staff doesn't have the operational plans to support the larger increase. So if we're going to be asking our citizens to pay additional money, I kind of like some kind of data to back that up with.
Sure.
That was just their recommendation.
Right.
I mean,
I
our
know.
recommendation, and I'm agreeing, I mean, if we're gonna raise the rates, I don't wanna jump a whole dollar.
Well, exactly, and that's
So,
why I
but we
like
don't
it.
have to do what their recommendation
Right, no, and I
was.
completely understand that. That's why I was asking, where do they come up with that dollar from? I wanted to
Sure.
see some data that they had.
Yeah, and I think in the staff report, so 50-cent base rate increase equates to about $36,000 extra in the water fund for the operations and maintenance increase. So the 50-cent increase is necessary to cover the projects that are planned and needed for next year. So they were looking then at, okay, how do we set ourselves up a little bit further? So the dollar ends up being about a 5% increase, just for additional
staff-
information.
Explain to the board that we are, doing the work, we are looking at the kind of long-term operations model that we have, given some of the growth happening, and we told them that we didn't have the model now to support that, and I think out of, a high side of caution, they just want us to be on the right path going forward, but I think we told them that there may be a better time once we have more of those numbers for that conversation.
Right, and I mean, I completely understand there's a cost of doing business, and of course, that has to go towards that, but, as we're continuously passing on fees to our residents, I want to make sure that we're giving them some, I know as a council, we can decide $1 or less or whatever, but at least I want to make an informed decision on looking at some raw numbers before I go out to my residents saying, oh, now we're going to increase your bill $1. Well, why? Oh, we don't know, that was our recommendation. Also, on the Evans treatment rate increases, I know that this year Greeley is charging us the same increase that they're passing on to their residents. Has it been in the past that will say Greeley has increased us by 11%, but only maybe passed a 5% increase onto their residents. Does that happen quite a bit? Because it seems like sometimes in recent years that that's happened, and it seems like sometimes other communities, especially us, are getting the raw end of the deal because Greeley's passing on a smaller rate to their community, but we're getting a larger increase. Does that happen often?
In the last couple of years, I know their residents have seen a smaller increase than Evans, Windsor, and I think Milliken. And that's, constant source of conversation with us. The model that they use does follow the direction from the agreement that we have. And it is based on those kind of the technical use of the water, those peaking factors. I would say we're having more and more conversations about the benefits of coming up with a more uniform model. There are lots of reasons and not bad reasons that they have why the customers are different. But to your question, yes, there have been years recently when Evans' rate has gone up higher than Greeley.
And then another point too, as Laura mentioned, I kind of want to see in this model a breakout, maybe adjusting rates for, commercial versus industrial. I'd like to see how that could play out into this utility rate model. I mean, passing those large increases on to, say like innovative foods and all that stuff. I mean, that's a pretty large increase. Sam's, yes, I can handle it, but I'd like to see that broken out between the two and kind of see if we can not only, make it economical for them to continue to do business in Evans, but also, I know there's a small increase for our residents, but also maybe see if we can maybe offset some of that cost so our residential customers don't bear the burden of, additional increases. Because in here, all I see is increase, and we're passing it on to our residents. And I know they've already complained about their rates being high enough as it is, and now we're passing more on to them. So I want to find some way to make this cost beneficial to everybody and,
So, and when I was talking about the impervious surfaces, and it seemed like it was a lot of work, we're putting innovative foods into tier 3 based off of their square footage, and their lot is not an impervious surface. So now, we're charging them the same as what we would be charging, for Sam's Club.
The thing is, we would have to figure out what the impervious surface is for everything, which we currently don't have.
It's not that hard. You get a map of the of the city, and there's calculations that we can make. We don't need to have someone go out with a tape and measure every square foot of that place. I mean, we can kind of get a pretty rough estimate. If they have a 45,000 square foot, if they have a 45,000 square foot lot, and 25,000 of it is the building, I mean, it's not that hard.
It's not that it's hard, it's just the time and effort that it takes to get that all
So we should
put
penalize
together.
innovative foods?
It's not penalizing.
It is
it's
penalizing them.
It's really looking into what it takes to gather all the information, because it's not just innovative foods.
No, it's not just
it's
innovative
all the
foods.
businesses.
It's all
so
the
it's
businesses.
it's everything. And so now we have to see how many companies we have. We have to go out and get them all, in essence, measured. And granted, yeah, there's software out there that we can use, but again, do we have that capability?
And why do we put
currently?
the ownership onto the city? Why don't we say, unless you come up with something that tells us that you don't have a 10,000 square foot parking lot, we're going to go off of our estimates of a 10,000 square parking lot. I mean, it doesn't have to be so time consuming to get a rough idea on how much we could be charging these people without it being overly taxing on the mom and pop stores.
I think we can accomplish your goal without, it'll move us from the parcel level model toward the impervious surface per parcel basis. In the short term, we can come up with some rationale that can get us closer. Because I think you're right that we can look at parcels and industrial parcels and look at, kind of make some estimates of percentages of lots, and come back with that. It won't be as specific as some of the other communities that we've talked about who have done the investment in measuring the lots for impervious surface. It's not, buildings, it's just driveways, it's everything else that they might have. And, I think that is an ideal
It is. an
model, and we can make that investment. I do think it'll take more time, to get to that level, but if the council is interested in something that moves us that way, we can make some defensible estimates, I think, looking at some parcels that we have, to come back with another alternative if council would like to think about splitting out commercial from industrial.
I just think that we need to actually, I mean, if we're talking about we want more retail, we want more businesses here, and then we're gonna penalize the smaller businesses because they just happen to squeak into a tier 3. I think it's counterintuitive.
I mean, I agree, so I mean, does anybody else have any more questions?
It's like,
No, I mean, what would it take to acquire? Like, how much time would it take in order for us to gather that information? Are we able to use the GIS system to get those measurements?
Well, we'd have to do the measurements to get to the impervious surface. To do it for the whole community accurately would take, some consultant experience.
Right.
And there are companies that do that,
Right.
that kind of thing, and it would take probably several months. But I'm saying we can do something, again, getting us closer in the nearer term. If council would like to show a little bit lesser cost for commercial, for industrial than commercial.
I guess getting information on how many businesses are commercial, how many businesses we have that are industrial, and then getting kind of the numbers to see what that looks like, and then also kind of configuring all the information to, in essence, make sense, because if we don't have, in essence, the actual footage, then an estimate, I mean, would that suffice? Considering that you want, it sounds like actuals.
no, I said estimates, right?
You're-
I thought we don't need to get down to, every square foot. I mean, but I guess where I'm at right now is if that's what you guys understood was that, that all the council was for, besides me, I guess, for this this second alternative, and it looks like that's the direction you guys have taken us in, so that's
Well-
what we're gonna do, and then we can maybe work on the other one, but I mean, I do like the idea at least of breaking out the industrial and the retail.
So with that being said, I mean, we don't have to take action on this right away. What we can do is just tell staff to go back and
Yeah.
say, hey, this is some more information we want. Table this and then have them bring it back to us. And then
Right.
from there, we can make our decision. So we can table this and say, hey, let's get some more of that data that we're looking for the industrial versus commercial and everything as you're suggesting, and then have them come back to us and bring us that information. I mean,
We're still in the work
I'm-
session. Until council changes it, the rate is what it is.
And
That's,
I mean, the
there's no
next
hurry
time I'll
with
come
that.
more prepared. I did not bring my notes from the last time. So I know there was a big discussion on it. But
so,
Go ahead, Mark.
no, go ahead, Jim. I'm sorry, Fred. Go ahead.
Okay, first, I need a question, Jackie. Jackie, on the water rates, isn't the 50-cent increase, wasn't that something that was previously set in place by previous city councils after the water rate study?
It was a recommendation at that point to continue that nominal increase each
So-
year, the base rate, yes.
So basically, the dollar increase that the sewer board is, water and sewer board is asking for is just a 50-cent increase above and beyond that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Now, the second thing, it seems like the last work session, we got kind of come to a consensus that due to time constraints, we would implement tier 2 and work on implementing impervious surface estimates and maybe try to implement something like that for next year due to the time constraints and needing to put these rate increases in by the 1st of January. That was my impression from that.
That's what I
work
gathered as
session.
well.
Thank you.
So my question is, we're automatically gonna do a 50-cent raise next year, and then, like Fred said, it's another 50 cents, that's why it's $1 instead of 50 cents. That's what I'm
That's the
saying.
recommendation from Water and
Inflationary.
Sewer Board.
Just, that's what I want to be clear on, because I just want to be very sure when we do whatever we're gonna look at, because I'm thinking also, you know, I've heard a lot from the residents as well, especially when I was on the road committee, but I'm thinking, well, we've got the police department that's gonna need some things, we've got the roads that we're trying to get going, you know, and I'm not saying I don't want to pay for the water or anything like that, but I'm thinking what would be maybe a good middle ground, or is there something that we could look at, because we've gotta make it palatable for the people, and we don't wanna do it, like some said, so much that they're going, well, I'm not gonna vote for anything else, or I'm not gonna give money for anything else, they could figure it out, they keep raising, you know. I'm not saying I'm against it at all, I just wanna make sure that we're making the right decision. So, the dollar worries me a little bit, just because of all the other things that we know we need. And I'm, like I said, not against it, I'm just trying to be cautious.
So with that being said, do we want to come back at another work session and discuss this and get some more information that has been discussed here for the rates? Or do we want to move forward with what we have now?
I mean, I think we should definitely look maybe at, you know, separating commercial and industrial. Take, you know, just because again, it's a work session. Why not get more information? Nothing's set in stone. So if we can get just more information in regards to how that will look, and that can assist with, you know, further direction.
I
At
think
least
that's
for
more
me.
important than even the impervious surfaces.
Right.
Are we in agreement to that?
Keep the
Sound
other
good,
rates
Scott?
moving.
Yeah, so let me, if I can try to just summarize a little bit. So I'm hearing council's priorities, and feedback for the stormwater rates is to look at the differences and come up with an appropriate basis for distinguishing between commercial and industrial for stormwater rates. Secondarily, you know, determining what it would take and if it's feasible to take the next step now toward the impervious surface model based on the data that we have. I'm going to look at that. I will comment on those, you know, because we've had some conversation when you bring one down, the others, you know, we do have to find the revenue somewhere. I'm also hearing, I think I heard some comment that council would like to see residential stay where it is if we could. Is that fair? I mean, we'll come back with some options, but that's the way, we got to give some direction to
Can you
the
bring that
modeling
also
consultant.
as like a
Yeah, we can
version?
show you
Yeah.
several different things. So that's stormwater. Is it council's will, can we keep moving forward with the other rates? Still need some clarification on I think I'm hearing consensus. Council's saying just the 50 cents on the water, the water base rate, not the dollar for this year.
I think.
And then we will, you know, always bring you information, and I know Randy's team's working on some long-term operational needs.
Can you frame what that would look like at 50 cents, like what that would give us, and then at 75, and then maybe $1? Because I just want to see, because the thing is, we always have to think about growth. What happens is, you know, if we stay conservative, then we're going to get X amount of money. We'll continue to grow, and then we have to come back because there's more that's needed. So I rather also have enough to cover those inflationary costs as well. But if we have 50, 75, and $1, I think that would help us see what that looks like.
So let me ask you for clarification then. So 50 cents is about $36,000 to the water fund. So what comes out of this base rate then is, you know, supplies, services, personnel for the water fund, and maintenance projects. So what that would mean, you know, we're at 1950 now. You know, it'd really just be breaking that up. So $36,000 of extra for water line breaks or maintenance or
But see, for example,
supplies and services.
projected, this is where we're at 2019. This is how much we received. This is what we're able to do. Our projection for 2020, this is what we see in growth.
And
If
with
we do
growth.
50 cents, this is what will occur, 75 and $1. And then also just giving like years to come, like this is what we're projecting. And so maybe 75 cents will cover this year, and $1, it's a little over. I mean, just so we can see what that looks like. Because again, we always want to factor in the growth aspect of it because that is important. And with anything, we can create a project, start a project, and then like we all know, we have to come back with money because we didn't project the growth the way we should have,
So for the sake of time, and I know, so can we do that at our next work session, or do you need the decision on that rate increase?
We can bring the water modeling back to you for your next meeting, so we can, I might request though that an exception to normal protocol, where we have the conversation in work session, but then we're ready to potentially adopt a rate based on council's decision or direction. We'll schedule the rates minus the stormwater, I'll come back to that, for consideration at your next meeting. So we'll have a work session on water, and then we'll schedule consideration of your rates, other rates minus stormwater, for that same night. So we can keep that moving and have rates, most of them implemented for the first of the year. Regarding stormwater, I think that will take us probably till the December 17th meeting. I don't think that's a problem. We can implement a rate subsequent to January 1st. We'll just have to figure out how to do that best. Does that work for Councilmember Neal?
I would like to invite the Water and Sewer Board in for their input on the water rates at least. What their thoughts were for wanting $1 increase, or a 50-cent increase from the already budgeted or pre-budgeted thought from previous councils of 50 cents and raising that up to $1. They must have had some concerns that we're not seeing expressed here. So I would like to find out what their thoughts were on that.
Is that council's wish? We can have a joint meeting, or would you like us to invite a representative, ask the chair perhaps to come?
Ask a representative, but I mean, I'm fine. I mean, for me, it was explained in the summary of why they were doing it, but I mean, if you want to bring a representative, I don't know.
That's what I read. They
Yeah.
said it seemed like they thought it was a better idea,
Better
so.
idea, yeah. I mean, if it helps you, Fred, I'm for it, but for me, I mean, it was
We
pretty
can
clear in
invite the chair perhaps to
Yeah, it was
come
pretty
just
clear for me.
have comments for
There
council.
was no minutes from that meeting.
There will be. They aren't finalized.
Maybe that might be
Yeah.
sufficient.
Yeah.
But do you want to still hear from them, or are minutes
I'd
sufficient?
rather hear from the horse's mouth. It's the best way.
All right, for the sake of time, we'll move on to the next item, the 2019 budget second revision.
Do you have that presentation? Oh. Thanks, Karen. All right, as Karen's starting to get that presentation up for us, we do have the data in the staff report we can talk about. So again, this is the second revision to the 2019 budget. Thank you. As is normal at this time of the year, is to look at the items that are needed for adjustment in our budget. Often though, it's the third or even fourth budget revision of the year. So nice to be able to have the second coming to you. I think we've done a really good job this year of really scrubbing the budget and looking at available budget for other needs that have come up during the year. So you'll also notice this list is fairly small for not doing a budget revision since the springtime. I will just go through the items that are listed in the staff report and in attachment A in the same details. We'll just kind of talk through them. Feel free to stop me at any point. The first one is an increase to Heritage Day budget. This was approved by City Council in February of 19 and somehow missed the first quarter budget revision. So my apologies, this is something that should have been included months ago. But the exciting point of having it now is that we get some data to talk about as well. So Brian Stone had provided me with the numbers here on this slide, as well as the fireworks. He really wanted me to show that for you guys. The event budget that was approved by council was $62,300. The expenses thus far have been about $54,000. They'll also spend some money on the 150th year expenses, the history hunt, the tree lighting ceremony, a few of those other things as well. So a few of those are still to come. The exciting part is we did get sponsorship revenue of over $16,000. So I think that's well in excess of what the city was hoping to get. Again, one of those was a big sponsorship for fireworks, but really great on the city's part to get those. We had other revenue of $5,800, so that's the wristband sales and pancake breakfast sales, that sort of thing. And then vendor fees for those vendors that came in were $825. So the total revenue brought in for Heritage Day was about $23,000, which means a net cost to the city of about $39,000. So I think every year that we look at that event, I think Brian has motivation to drill down that number to be smaller and smaller net as the sponsorships grow and the support for the event grows as well. But the $42,000 additional budget is what is needed in our living budget to reflect council's wishes at that point. Item 1.2, I also threw on this slide, is Riverside concession revenue and expenses. So also a very profitable program was the concession stand at Riverside Park. Their revenues are in excess of $23,000 for the last rolling 12 months, which is really great there, to compensate for the increased cost of supplies and food and that sort of thing at the concession stand. That budget needed $8,000, so we're increasing the revenue to offset that cost by $8,000, but the revenue received was much more than that. A few other items in the general fund is a transfer to ERA for the remaining building abatement and demolition, also previously approved in the preliminary budget revision by council. It's $102,000 there. You'll also see this come to you on the ERA side at the night that this is on table for consideration. The next two are due to an increase in development activity that we've had here at the city. The budget does require about $145,000 of additional building inspection services. The good point, similar to the concession sales, is there's revenue offsetting this cost to the city's behalf in terms of building permit review fees that have come in. So as we pass those along to, or as we pay our third-party building inspector services to provide those, we do have the revenue and the expense there that's needed to be reflected in the budget. Item 1.5 is also needing about $61,000 of additional planning services due to the increased development that we've had this year. And then item 1.6 is the last general fund item. The police department did receive a small post grant this year, so they have already received the revenue and had very specific equipment they were able to spend under that grant, but it was not reflected in the budget. It's helpful for us to do that at this time. In the fire impact fund, again, that increased development, we've had higher impact fees brought in this year than we anticipated. Those fees we do hold and distribute out quarterly to the fire district, and our budget needs to be reflected to have the room to not exceed that expenditure amount as we disperse that out to them. So we would like to increase that fund by $100,000 both on the revenue and expenditure side. You'll recall we had a change in the current service level, is kind of how I turned it, for the refuse fund this year with the change in our recycling program, bringing some of that billing in-house. I think we have a much more accurate count of users, both on the recycling and the refuse side. And we've had a few months of this year to reflect those current revenue and expense levels. The great thing about this is we're increasing the budget by $90,000. That's the expense budget, that is. But we are anticipating the revenues to be about $140,000 that we had not previously reflected in the budget due to those rates. So it's actually a positive impact to the refuse fund of about $49,000. So if you look at attachment A and there's a negative there, that negative is unusual, but it is positive to the fund. In our enterprise funds as well, we have 3 items in water. We have a NISP interim financing, as we talked about at the last work session. Our first financing requirement under the NISP project will be $800,000. We've been told that that payment will likely be due before the end of 2019. So we would like to increase that in the budget now. And if you recall, we did have development fee revenue to offset that payment. So you'll see the revenue there for the water fund. We had an increase in water meter expenses, both on the revenue and expense side development there, so you'll notice, again, net zero effect to the water fund. And the water treatment expense, so as we're doing the rate setting process late in the year, the budget's already been approved. This is an item that should have come in first quarter budget revision as well. We'll need a little bit more revenue and expense budget to accommodate those rate increases. We'll see that again in first quarter 2020. We'll get included whatever rate increases council's approving here in the next few weeks. And then on the wastewater fund side, council's also approved a contract for lagoon dewatering and solids handling in a preliminary budget revision, so that will be reflected here now as well. In the interest of time, this is just graphically showing the fund balance impact that is also shown in attachment A. You'll see very little impact as many of the revision items did have revenues offsetting their cost. And usually at this point we show, bless you, we have the most recent sales tax report is from August of 2019. So we are showing year over year increases in sales tax collections of about 6% from August 18 to August 19. So it's prudent for us to show you that one of our major revenue sources is continuing to increase at the point that we're looking at budget revision items and adding anything to the budget. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments of staff?
Was reviewed by your finance committee too.
No questions, thank you.
All right, we'll move on to our next item then, since there's no questions. The 2020 City Council meeting dates and times. Here from staff.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This is the annual process that we have just to review the projected council schedule for the following year. Could you bring up that calendar, please? This calendar just shows your meetings per the code that outlines your meeting times for 7 p.m. on the first and third Tuesdays of every month. The code also allows you to modify that schedule by resolution. So this calendar here shows those Tuesdays. It also shows the exceptions to that schedule that council has typically wanted to include. Election day, next year we have two of those. On April 7th, we have our municipal election. On November 3rd, we have National Election Day. And then on August 4th, that week we also have, I believe on the 5th there, 4th is National Night Out, so we'd have your meeting on the 3rd of that week. So the purpose of our work session is really just to hear if council has any feedback, if there's anything different than what you're showing here that you'd like to do for your calendar for next year. If not, we'll put this together in a resolution for your consideration at the next meeting.
Jim, when was the CML in June?
CML is in June, but this year it does not fall on a council week.
Okay.
So I believe it's that week of the 8th to the 12th. Or it might be the...
Or the 22nd through the 26th?
Sorry, 22nd?
It's the 27th, I believe.
That weekend.
Sorry,
That-
I'm looking at the wrong date. The 24th.
Oh, nice.
So yes, it always
So
starts
that was perfect.
midweek, so it's that third full week.
Yeah, that just looked like it was the only one that I had a question on.
I think it looks fine. Any,
That looks good.
any comments or questions from
Nope,
staff?
looks great.
We'll go with it.
All right, moving on. Next item, designation of public place for the posting of notices of public meetings. We'll hear from staff.
All right, this item also goes under the heading of housekeeping. We're required by law to post all of our meetings in a public place, at least 24 hours prior to the meeting. There was a change to state law this year that gives you another option, and I've asked our city clerk, Karen Frawley, to just briefly summarize that law change, and we're just seeking your direction on whether you'd like to keep doing it the way we're doing it or make a change. So.
Thank you. House Bill 191087 allows local governments to be exempt from actually physically posting our public notices for our meetings, as long as they are posted on the city website. And currently we are posting not only on the bulletin board outside of the council chambers, but also on the website.
right now, we're doing both, and we just want to see if you'd like to keep that practice, that's fine, of course. Or if you don't like to go only electronic, or only physical. Those are options, and we just.
I
I'd
would
like to
like to
keep
keep
both.
the, yeah.
I like both.
I like both as well.
Quick one, Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, last item, council discussion. Fred, actually, I want to hear from you about how your trip went.
Oh, that's,
The trip was very good. It's some interesting people. I was very shocked to find out that I was the only elected official on there, and that most of the people were not from the cities that we or sister cities that we visited. I do have some photos that passed around. The most moving and memorable would be being in Heathrow for the Remembrance Day, 2-minute silence. We were just waiting for our thing. Most of the people I was with on the trip were waiting for our things to finish coming through security check, and you could have heard a pin drop in that airport. I think could not see any movement in the corridors out of the corner of my eye. It was amazing to me that people were that respectful for that. They did have a remembrance ceremony in Portsmouth on the 8th of November, which we were attended, and then there was a reception for the History Colorado tour group. And I was asked by a gentleman that was in the proceeding to participate by stepping up in front of the monument with the rest of the veterans.
I see that.
And I told the gentleman that I was just a Vietnam vet, and it didn't matter. And at the conclusion of the vicar's remarks and Lord Mayor's comments, the Lord Mayor came up and shook my hand, and we had a conversation. We did find out that at the reception that we were encouraged to take a cross and write family members or friends that died or served during World War I or II, and they have like little plots of grass set up like sod, and they have little crosses all the way around, and then a big cross in front of it with a poppy on it, and the veterans that were on the podium with me had several of them went and placed crosses in that grass spot. And at the conclusion of the reception, I was asked by one of the History Colorado members if she asked her if I was going to place a cross, and I said yes. I'm going to place one for my uncle who served in World War I in the trenches in France that I'm named after, and she asked me to place a cross for her, and she had about 4 names written on it, so it was very, very moving, a part of it. I had been asked by the chief of police, our chief of police, to take some patches with me and see if he could effect some trades, and I was pretty diligent in that, and I think I made some good contacts there for him, and they also in Belgium or Sweden, or not Sweden, excuse me, Switzerland and Belgium and France, all were very appreciative during this time period of what the United States had come to help with to end the terror Hitler's Germany. So it was just a very moving experience for me. And the people in Ashby, great, they want us, they would like to have more contact with us. And that's pretty much the same with all the sister cities we visited. So.
That's awesome.
Anyone else?
I just want to mention that I'm a member of the Hispanic Women of Weld County. On November 9th, we had this amazing breakfast and award breakfast. And we had as a keynote speaker, Dolores Huerta. She's an activist, and she is just an icon, for the Hispanic community. It was a great turnout. It was like over 400 people that came. It was just amazing to see the community come to this event and really support, our committee, as well as, be there to empower everyone, as well as empowering women, women of color to run for office. It was just a really great event, and it was nice. And that's all that I have.
I think I want to thank the city staff for the good business after hours that we had last week.
Was it a good
Yeah, it
one?
was really good.
It was
Yeah.
attended very well, and the mayor and our city manager and also our economic developer made
Allison?
a few lovely little speeches and did a good job.
Yep.
So thank you very much.
And I'll just bring up one thing here real quick. On the MPO, we had Wellington wants to petition to leave the upper Front Range MPO and join the northern Front Range MPO. What that means to the smaller communities is if they become a member, if they're voted on, is less money that could be available to the smaller communities. So as a member of the MPO who's looking out to get every dollar they can for Evans for our, infrastructure, I'll probably want to be one of these members voting no if they come to us with a petition. So just to let you know about that.
Thank you for advocating for our city.
Anything else? All right, with that, we'll take a short 5-minute recess before